$100 worth of meat down the drain. Ouch. That's painful. At least my dog's going to get something nice to eat. I have been bamboozled by this sausage. The sausage we're going to be making today is one I've been getting a lot of emails about here recently. It's a Mexican-style chorizo sausage brought to us by Smokin' Joe's Pit Barbecue. I'm going to put a link to the original video in the description box below. This is a really interesting recipe because traditional Mexican chorizo is not very well bound together. It's actually a very crumbly sausage, and that's because of the different ingredients that are used in the recipe. This recipe, on the other hand, reimagines Mexican chorizo to create a well-bound together link that's smoked. So the end result should be something similar to like a Texas hot link, a bratwurst, you know, that same well-bound together texture with those chorizo flavors. Now, I do want to say that I did reach out to Joe before making this video. I asked Joe 3 questions to help me get a better idea of what this sausage was supposed to be like. Number 1, what did he think about the sausage? His response? Absolutely perfect, great flavor, great texture. Number 2, I said, could you describe the texture for me? He said it was exactly like a Polish kielbasa, okay? And number 3, I said, would you change anything about the recipe now that you've had an opportunity to taste it and process it? He said, absolutely not. So what we're looking at here is a sausage recipe that should produce a smoky linked sausage that has a similar or the same texture as a Polish kielbasa. That's the goal. Let's see if it delivers. Here we go.
On today's video, I'm going to be making a Mexican-style chorizo. Let's get to it. All right, let's go over the ingredients for our Mexican chorizo sausage. I'm starting with 20 pounds of pork, that's 9,080 grams, 90 grams of salt, 45 grams of black pepper, 54 grams of onion powder, 45 grams of garlic powder, 18 grams of oregano, 14 grams of thyme, 9 grams of ground clove, 5 ounces of a chile pasilla. So this is the pasilla chili, as you can see right here.
Interesting note about chilies, for those of you who are pepper enthusiasts, the chili that Joe is holding is not the pasilla chili. This actually looks more like the chili colorado or the guajillo chili, but it's hard to tell. The pasilla chili looks a lot like this, and it gets its name from the Spanish word for raisin, which is pasa, because when this chili is dried, it looks like a little raisin, all shriveled up, hence the word pasilla.
It's got a nice red color, and these are very mild when it comes to the heat level. I'm also adding 2 ounces of a New Mexico chili. I'm also using 2 ounces of chile ancho, also vary in heat levels. Sometimes they're sweet, sometimes these are really hot. Since I am going to be cold smoking these chorizo sausages.
Okay, quick clarification here. Joe said he was going to be cold smoking these sausages. That is not true. These sausages are going to be cooked low and slow over a hot smoke. And this is a typical misunderstanding that I hear from some barbecuers because they're used to cooking meats at 190, 200, even 225. And so when all of a sudden you're cooking at 150, like in the case of these sausages, it's very natural to say cold smoke, but cold smoking is something completely different. Cold smoking happens basically at room temperature, 85 Fahrenheit, 90 at the absolute highest. You put your raw meat into your smokehouse, let it smoke for however long you want, and then you pull your raw meat out. It never gets cooked. Unlike hot smoking, where the end result is a cooked product.
I am using 22.7 grams of a curing salt. So the last ingredient is 8 bay leaves that I ground up.
As it stands right now, not a bad spice profile. I mean, these are typical ingredients that you would find in a classic chorizo.
So one main ingredient that's missing from this recipe that your traditional Mexican chorizo has is vinegar. We are not going to be adding any vinegar to this recipe. So there are 2 reasons I'm not adding any vinegar to this recipe. Number 1, the vinegar really tenderizes the meat to the point where there is no texture on the chorizo. And number 2 is because the acid that's in the vinegar will actually eat through your sausage casing, and we do not want that. Trust me, I speak from experience.
All right, very good. Joe's not a fan of the classic Mexican chorizo texture, and vinegar is one of those ingredients that makes the sausage crumbly, so we're not going to be adding vinegar to the recipe. Not a problem. If you're not familiar with how vinegar works when you add it to a recipe, vinegar is an acid, and the moment you add an acid, and it doesn't matter what acid it is, it begins to denature the proteins in such a way that they will no longer bind to each other. So if you add vinegar to a recipe, you will not be able to get a good bind. You're always going to end up with a crumbly sausage.
All right, so I'm going to throw my chiles in some hot water, get them really nice and soft, and I'll bring you guys right back. And I'm just going to cut these down into cubes, small enough to fit down the throat of my grinder.
It looks like we're using pork shoulder or Boston butt for this sausage. That's an absolutely brilliant cut to make sausages. It naturally has a 70% lean to a 30% fat ratio, and while you can literally use any part of the pig to make sausage, the pork shoulder is one you don't have to add any fat to.
I'm gonna pop this in my freezer for about 45 minutes.
Absolutely brilliant technique. Pop it into the freezer before you grind it. It's going to help it chill a little bit so that you keep your fat together. And it looks like it's time to make our chili sauce. Let's see what we've got going on here.
Just gonna toss them all in there. I'm also gonna add a little bit of this hot water, probably a cup of this. I wanna add as little water as possible. All right, I'm gonna blend this on high for about 3 minutes and I'll bring you guys right back.
I can almost smell this chili paste from here. I can tell you right now, that probably smells pretty incredible.
So I'm using a 10mm die to grind up this meat. All right, so we've reached the end of our grind. I'm gonna add about half a cup of crushed ice. So the reason I add the ice is because there's always a little bit of meat that gets stuck inside the grinder head, and the crushed ice will push it out. So here we go.
There's a lot of different ways to push that excess meat through the grinder, and crushed ice is possibly my least favorite, primarily because it's so taxing on the grinder. Personally, I would just recommend to grab a handful of already ground meat, stuffing it into the hole, and that should be sufficient to push any of the meat out, and you'll be good to go.
This smells delicious. All right, so I've got 6 cups of the red chili. And to start, I'm gonna add 3 cups. All right, my favorite part, mix it all together. All right, so we need a little bit more red chili. So I'm gonna add the last cup.
All right, so it looks like he's added the entire 6 cups of chili paste to the meat, and now it's time to stuff. Let's see what this looks like. I bet this is gonna produce an absolutely beautiful looking color.
All right, let's load up our canister. I like to open up the casing with 2 fingers, dip it in the water.
Great technique. Filling that sausage casing with a little bit of water before you put it on the horn is not only going to lubricate it from the inside, but it's also going to make it easier to stuff, keeping that casing from sticking to the horn.
Get that mixture to the tip of our horn. Tie our knot. I like to throw some ice on our tray just to keep everything ice cold.
Ice on a tray, I've never actually seen that before, and you know, although technically it's not going to hurt the sausage, it's really not going to help the sausage at all. If you're using a sausage stuffer like we see in this video, there's literally nothing you could do at this stage that can hurt your sausage. The 2 areas you have to be super concerned about is the grinding and the mixing. That's when you want everything cold. By this point, if a problem has happened, it's already going to be too late.
All right, I'm going to twist these up. I'm going to pop them in my fridge overnight, and tomorrow morning, we'll throw them on the smoker.
This is a very important technique when you're making cured sausages. You got to give the cure an opportunity to do its job, and that's usually a 12 to 24-hour rest in the refrigerator.
So let me recap to where we're at right now. I did smoke these for 2 hours at 150 degrees, an hour and a half at 175 degrees, and they've been smoking at 225 degrees. All right, so 30 minutes later, and I pulled the sausages off. Now I did rinse them in cool water a couple of times just to cool down the sausages. Next, I'm gonna add some ice to our sausages to cool them down completely. So the reason I add ice to my sausages is to rapidly cool them down, and it really stops the fat wherever it's at inside the sausage. So
there shouldn't be a whole lot of fat underneath the skin of your sausage when you're done cooking. If there is, or if there's a lot of liquid, you're gonna have a problem. But let's just keep going. A nice ice water bath is gonna cool your sausages down really quick, and it's gonna keep them from shriveling up. And so let's look at the finished product.
And they smell absolutely amazing. That's a texture that I wanted right there. Not a super fine sausage. Look at that. Let's give it a taste. All right, let's give this Mexican chorizo a try and see how we did. Check that out. It smells so good in here.
And by the looks of it, it does not look like a smooth slice. So let's get into the recipe and we'll make it exactly the way Joe did and see for ourselves.
that looks beautiful, nice and pebbly. We are off to a good start. Let's take a peek at our spices. I've scaled this recipe down to 1 kilo. So there's our dry spices. We've got our chili sauce, and it has been cooled down because it was very hot coming out of the blender. Dry spices in, and this smells really good right about now. I mean, it's pretty herb forward. You got the bay leaf and the oregano really coming through, and now it's time to add our chili sauce. And Joe added 100% of his chili sauce to the mix, and since this is just a scaled down recipe, we're going to do the exact same. So chili sauce in, let's go ahead and mix it. And at this point, we've got some pretty big red flags, but we'll talk about them here in a second. We're just going to mix this until everything is well incorporated. And now we're going to put this into a casing. This is just a hog casing that has been rehydrated. Nothing special about this step. We're going to go ahead and give this a twist. And since Joe did not prick his sausage, we are not going to do that either. We are going to take these nice, fat, plump, juicy links and put them in the fridge overnight so the cure can do its job. And it's now tomorrow, and it's time to cook. This is going into our digital smoker from Smoking It, and we're going to cook at the exact same schedule that Joe did. 150 degrees for a couple hours. We're then going to bump it up to 175 for an hour and a half, and then we're going to finish it off at 225 till we get to an internal temp of 150, and this is what it looks like. And what's cool about the smoker is that this really dials in the temperature, so you don't have to worry about any temperature flare-ups. And check this out. What a beautiful looking sausage. Took on incredible color. Let's go ahead and get these cooled down. Pop them in a nice cool water bath. We'll keep them from shriveling up, which is all about aesthetics because no one wants to eat a shriveled up sausage. Look at these babies. Nice and plump. No shrinkage, no fat leakage. We're going to leave these to cool. They will bloom, and then we'll give them a taste. Here's what they look like.
All right, here it is. Let's see how it came out. All right, looks just like the one in the video. Nice coarse texture, very juicy. Smells great. Smells like a chorizo sausage with that smoky element. Let's give it a bite. Okay. Wow. Lot to unpack here, folks. Let's talk about what to me is the most important issue: texture. This recipe set out to create a sausage that was the opposite texture of traditional chorizo. Let me show you the texture of this sausage. All right, we give it a little squeeze. You can see nice and juicy, but it is definitely not well bound together. This is quite crumbly. Matter of fact, I can just pull pieces out of it from the middle. And there's a very specific reason why this sausage is crumbly, and we'll talk about it here in a second, but I can't stop thinking about how disappointed Joe must have felt when he took his first bite of this sausage, only to realize that it had the exact same texture as traditional Mexican chorizo, which he said he hated. Let's go ahead and do a quick snap test. Let me cut that piece off and see how this snaps. Okay. I gotta be honest, not a great snap. It's a little chewy. The sausage is a little loose. It could be better. And there's also a specific reason why this doesn't have a great snap. We're gonna be talking about that here in a minute. Let's talk about flavor. And I know flavor can be somewhat subjective, so take this with a grain of salt. In my opinion, I feel this sausage is undersalted. Salt's an interesting ingredient when it comes to making sausage, and it's not only for flavor, but it's also used for protein extraction. There are salt-soluble proteins in meat. One is myosin, and the other one is actin. And salt helps extract these proteins from the meat, which helps bind your fat, and it also helps bind your proteins together to give you that really traditional sausage bind. If you don't add enough salt, you're going to end up with a loose and crumbly sausage. But that is not the reason why this sausage is loose and crumbly. I'll tell you why here in just a second. Mexican chorizo is not a sausage that's known for being balanced. It's actually heavily spiced, and it really works for chorizo because it's often eaten with other things. Matter of fact, I don't think there's ever a situation when someone would just eat the Mexican chorizo by itself. Every time you hear about it, it's always with another dish. Here's a couple of Joe's examples.
We like to eat it with huevos con chorizo. We also like to add chorizo to beans. Beans with chorizo is fantastic.
And if you want to make a sausage in the style of Mexican chorizo, but you don't adjust the spices, what you're going to end up with is a very spice-heavy, unbalanced sausage that is incredibly difficult to eat, and that's what we have right here. Maybe if you chopped it all up and add it to another dish, it would probably work a little bit better, but if you try to eat this like this, it's just not going to be a pleasant experience. I do have to say that I am appreciating the smoky quality to this chorizo. That's kind of a new thing for me because I've never had a smoked Mexican chorizo, and I really like that quality. But what I am missing is that brightness that comes from traditional Mexican chorizo, and it usually comes from the vinegar that's added, but because no vinegar was added, we do not get that brightness, and it kind of changes the dynamics of this sausage altogether. So there's a lot of room for improvement here. Some of the problems in the original recipe came down to technique, while other problems came down to experience. What we were promised was a sausage that had a smooth texture, much like a kielbasa, with a chorizo flavor, but instead we got a crumbly sausage that was overspiced, unbalanced, and very difficult to eat. And for all those reasons, I'm going to have to say that this sausage recipe is a bust. But here is where things get interesting. We're going to go back to the beginning and completely rewrite this recipe. I'm going to show you what works and what doesn't work. We're also going to talk about why it doesn't work. I'm even going to show you a couple points in this video that demonstrate how this sausage was doomed for failure.
Okay, let's look at the recipe. First thing we're going to do is increase the salt to 1.5%. Better flavor, better protein extraction. We're also going to decrease the onion and increase the garlic just a touch. As far as the herbs go, I like the oregano where it's at, but we're going to drop that thyme down to 0.1%, and this is a personal preference. You can add more if you want, or you can add less. No big deal.
Let's talk about chilies, because this is where your chorizo is going to get a large part of its flavor. And no matter what anyone tells you, you can use whatever chilies that you want. There's really no wrong answer here. Each chili is going to have its own unique flavor profile, and it's going to affect your chorizo differently. So I would suggest playing with the different chilies and seeing which one you like the best. Today, we're going to be going for more of a classic Mexican chorizo flavor. And so we're going to be using the chili ancho, the chili árbol, and the guajillo chili. The chili ancho is a great chili. It's got this nutty, almost chocolatey quality to it with this intense aroma that reminds me of a cross between fresh tobacco leaves and the fruit tamarindo, if you're familiar with that fruit. It's a mild chili that brings a tremendous amount of flavor. Our next chili is the chili árbol. This is going to bring a little heat to our chorizo. In my opinion, it's not quite as hot as the cayenne pepper, but hotter than the serrano. It also brings a whole lot of flavor, and it's going to be great in our sausage. Our last chili is the guajillo chili, and this is an incredible chili. It's got these smoky notes, fruity notes, almost has this berry quality to its flavor. It's about as hot as the chili ancho, so it is a mild chili, and it has incredibly complex flavors. So all three of these peppers together are going to make an absolutely amazing chorizo.
All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to keep the ratios the same. We're just going to come in heavier on the ancho, and then we've got the árbol and guajillo chilies. Curing salt and bay leaf looks good, and a few extra ingredients. We're going to come in with cumin powder, chipotle powder, coriander. We're also going to be adding a binder to this recipe. We're going to be doing 3% non-fat dry milk, and then we're going to be adding an optional ingredient called encapsulated citric acid at 0.15%, which is going to bring a little brightness to this sausage, and we're adding that simply because we're not going to be adding vinegar. Now let's talk about the sauce. This sauce is absolutely critical when making a chorizo-style sausage, but what Joe doesn't realize right now as he's preparing this sauce is that this sauce is going to destroy his sausage. And it's going to happen in two ways. The first problem with this sauce, and probably the biggest problem with this sauce, is the acidity. I'm going to take the pH of this sauce right quick so that you can see what I'm talking about. And I want you to remember that the pH of vinegar is somewhere between 2 and 3. This chili sauce has a pH of 3.3, which is incredibly acidic. So if we were to add this sauce to our sausage, like we did earlier, it will do exactly what vinegar does. Because remember, when you add an acid to your meat, it's going to denature the proteins and keep the sausage meat from forming a good bind. This is the meat that was mixed using that same exact chili sauce. And when I grab a little handful of the meat, you're going to see exactly what happens when you add an acid. Check that out. It just crumbles right out of my hand. There's no bind whatsoever. And this is the direct result from adding the acid, or the sauce in this case, to the meat. We're going to take a look at the exact second Joe destroyed his sausage, and it is right here. The moment that sauce touched that meat, this sausage was doomed for failure. What Joe's about to experience is an emotional sausage making nightmare because as he mixes this meat, what he's looking for is a proper bind. And under normal circumstances, he would be getting it right about now. But because he hasn't gotten it yet, he's going to add more sauce, which further compounds the issue. And it's this arbitrary addition of sauce that becomes his second problem.
All meat has a natural ability to absorb moisture. And while some meat can absorb more liquid than others, it's a good idea when it comes to liquid or sauce additions in your recipe to keep it at about 5% of the total weight of meat. When you start adding too much liquid and it overwhelms the sausage, it starts to negatively affect the texture. It can become mushy and spongy, and it's just not very pleasant. The exception to this rule is if you add a binder. Binders increase the liquid holding capacity of your sausage, and binders are things like phosphates, non-fat milk powder. You could use potato starch, carrot fiber. Those ingredients allow you to add more liquid to your sausage without it negatively affecting the texture. So if you're going to be using a binder in your recipe, like we're doing with this sausage, you can increase the amount of liquid that you add to a total of 10%. I wouldn't go a whole lot higher than 10%. So let's take a look at how much liquid, how much sauce Joe added to the original recipe.
The amount of sauce that's being added right now equals to roughly about 17% by the weight of the meat. Now, there's no binder in this recipe, so that's an extraordinary amount of liquid to add to your sauce. It's not only going to make it loose, it's going to make it a little mushy, but during the cooking process, that sauce is going to turn into a liquid and it's going to flow inside your sausage casing. As this cooks, that liquid is going to sit directly under the casing, which is going to keep the casing from crisping up and drying out properly during the cook, and it's the reason why the casing was more chewy than snappy.
All right, that's the breakdown. Let's now remake this sausage using our modified recipe and see how it turns out.
All right, we've got our new spice mix with all those extra ingredients, and this should fill in the blanks where the other sausage was lacking. We've also got that non-fat dry milk, and that's going to help bring a juicier, well-bound together sausage. This here is the encapsulated citric acid, and like I said, totally optional ingredient, but this is going to add a little acidity, which is going to brighten up the sausage. And then, of course, we have our chili sauce. Now, I do want to take the pH so I can show you how to fix this problem. So our new chili sauce has got a pH of 3.41. So in order to fix this, we need to raise the pH, and I'm going to do that by adding baking soda. I want the pH between 5.6 and 7.0. That's going to work beautifully in our meat, and you don't need a pH meter to do this recipe because I'm going to put exactly how much you need in the recipe link below. So after the baking soda addition, our pH is closer to neutral, a 6.5, and now we can safely add this to our meat without it causing any problems. The final ingredient in this recipe is going to be just a touch of a Modelo beer. Now, you don't have to add any beer. You can use all chili sauce for the liquid, but I am going to mix it up. I think that'll give us a beautiful flavor. All right, let's add the chili sauce. We're only going to be adding 5%, so we're putting in 50 grams. This is a 1 kilo recipe, and now we've got our 50 grams of chili sauce. It's now time to mix everything together. I'm just going to be putting this into a stand mixer. This little stand mixer can do about 4 pounds roughly. We're going to come in with our spices. Now this has our binder, our salt, all those ingredients. We're adding that right now. And then we're going to come in with our beer. Now the beer is going to make up the final portion of the liquid. So we're adding roughly 50 grams of beer. That gives us a total of 100 grams of liquid. That's 10% of the total weight of the meat. So we're going to mix this until we've got a nice sticky bind. And I think we mixed for maybe 2 to 3 minutes. And this looks much, much better. Coming together incredibly well. Our final ingredient, we're going to be adding the encapsulated citric acid, and you always want to add this last, otherwise you risk the encapsulation breaking, and it'll also ruin your sausage. If you want to know more about encapsulated citric acid, stick around to the very end of this video, and I'll post a video suggestion. It'll tell you all about it. So our sausage is now mixed. This is what our batter looks like, and I am incredibly pleased. Very, very sticky. It's got a nice consistency. We've got a great grind, a lot of particle definition. And when I grab a handful of it, it sticks to the bottom of my hand, just like that. And this looks amazing. So let's get this into its casing. We're using rehydrated hog casings for this sausage, and there's nothing special about this step. One thing we will be doing that wasn't done in the original video is poking out all the air pockets. And we've got a video coming up that talks about this very topic. Should you poke? Should you not poke? You're going to want to stick around for that. So let's go ahead and twist these fat links. They're going to be absolutely incredible. Check that out. All right, no big deal here. And now it's time to cook. Into the smoker they go, and we're going to follow the exact same cooking schedule. Now, under normal circumstances, are now done cooking, and look at that. Absolutely brilliant looking color, amazing looking sausage. Let's go ahead and get this into a cold water bath. This stops the cooking process right in its tracks. It keeps the sausage from shriveling up, so you end up with these beautiful plump sausages at the time of serving. And speaking of serving, this is what our sausages look like now that they're ready. Let's give them a slice and see how they taste.
Our sausage is ready. I think it looks amazing. Let me know in the comment section what you think. What do you think? Did we nail it? Give that a little squeeze. Very, very juicy. And this has really got a nice bind on it. Even with that beautiful coarse grind, this is holding together incredibly well. A lot like a Polish kielbasa. So we've got that smooth slice. Great smell. I mean, that combination of smoke and that Mexican chorizo, like I said earlier, I'm not used to that, but I'm not hating it. I mean, that really is a nice sort of elevated version of a chorizo. Let's just give it a taste, see what it's all about. What a difference. This is absolutely incredible. Very, very tasty. All the major issues that we were having with version 1, the original recipe, have now been fixed. The texture of this sausage is incredible. You got the coarsely ground meat, the fat that literally melts in your mouth. It's got this creamy quality about it. It's properly salted, and the seasonings and chilies are a lot more balanced with the pork. So you get more of the pork flavor and less of that overwhelming chili flavor. There's this low level acidity that's really playing off of the classic Mexican chorizo flavors, and I'm absolutely loving it. As a standalone sausage, it works. This is incredibly delicious, but you can also chop this up and add it to virtually anything to give it this beautiful south of the border element.
Let me show you a center slice of this sausage so you can see what's going on. Now, this sausage has not been reheated, so it's cold. And look at that. Absolutely amazing. Beautiful particle definition, chunks of meat and fat sprinkled throughout, and most importantly, incredible bind. This sausage holds together really well, and that was one of our main goals.
Last thing to do is give this a bite and see if we got a nice, snappy casing. Here we go. Very tender casing, nice, snappy bite, and I'm loving the heat level coming from the sausage. It's not overwhelming, it's just perfect, at least for me. I hope you get a chance to make this version. There's a lot of room for creativity. If you just follow the general principles outlined in this video, you can adjust the spices, you can adjust the chilies, and you can have a lot of fun with this sausage because this actually works. If you have any questions about this recipe, leave them in the comment section below. If you're not yet subscribed, take a moment and click that subscribe button and that notification bell, because in our next episode, we're going to travel back in time to when Bradley from Chud's Barbecue was just a little bitty baby as we recreate
an iconic Leroy and Lewis sausage. I don't want you to miss it.
Give me a thumbs up if you got something out of this video or you just found it entertaining. Thanks a lot for being here. We'll see you in the next one.